Hey there, Geek family. Geek Dad has been complaining about the drive time to work every day, so we thought maybe he could use an Infinity Gauntlet to thin out the population. Since I don't know how to get to Nidavellir, I had to use some more local materials. This is how we did it. Here we go. For this build, I decided to try to be organized and make actual templates. Making the template for the arm guard proved to be a little tougher than I thought. I tried several methods and ended up just wrapping some paper around a model of the glove itself and coming up with the right size. I then cut it out, added about an extra 1/4 inch on either side to give me some space to work with, traced that onto some 1/2 inch EVA foam, and then using an X-Acto knife just cut that out. Once I had the arm guard cut out completely, I then wrapped it around my model hand to try to see what the fit was. There were a couple of points where I had to cut off a little bit of extra just because it didn't fit quite snugly enough. Then using some standard Weldwood Contact cement, I put that on both sides and let it cure, and then just stuck it together. Once those edges were stuck together, you can see that my seam did not turn out very clean. So rather than trying to cut it apart and then put it back together, I ended up just covering it up by again taking a little piece of the foam, getting it to the right length, and gluing it on. All of the other pieces for the gauntlet were cut out separately, and just using my fake hand and some images from Google, I freehanded out each piece individually, tried to fit it onto my stuffed hand just to make sure it was going to fit appropriately and was going to work. Then using my fancy finger length measuring tool, I was able to get things to go pretty well. You can see I marked things with left and right just to make sure that I didn't forget which side was which, and then laid it all out onto my surface to make sure it looked mostly correct. Once I had all the pieces, I then also put some painter's tape on the back and applied them to the actual arm guard using the hand as well. Again, just to make sure that I had everything positioned correctly, was the right size, the proportions were good. There's also some decoration on the back of the gauntlet itself. Again, I cut that out, used some painter's tape, and put it on to make sure that it was going to fit appropriately. Once I had all of my patterns completed, I then taped those to 1/4 inch EVA foam, and again using my X-Acto knife, cut those out. You'll notice on my patterns that there are a lot of pencil markings. Those are for beveling or raised portions, and I used strips of EVA foam, mostly the 1/4 inch, to enhance all those sections. Several of the pieces have intricate cutout work. That's a little tedious, but it does make the overall look of the gauntlet really spectacular when you can get those cut out, because you get the paint and all in those little sections, and it makes it pop. As I said previously, I did cut out pieces of the 1/4 inch EVA foam to use as the enhancements in the individual parts to the gauntlet itself. This again gives it a little bit of depth. One other technique I used, I wanted to give a couple of the guard pieces some texture, so I just cut into the foam itself and pulled it away. This is a little tedious, but it does give you a nice effect afterward when you're putting the paint on. You do need to be careful when you're doing this. You're using an X-Acto knife, and the foam's, it's only 1/4 inch. So be cautious as you are using that X-Acto knife to cut into the foam, because you will cut your finger and ending up adding a little bit of your DNA to the piece. Once all of the pieces are cut out and I've put on my beveling, I then chose to glue the individual pieces that adhere directly to the arm guard onto the arm guard. I did set those on there after you see I've drawn a center line here, and I wanted to make sure the center line on the front matched that enhanced line that I have on the back that's covering up my bad seam. But I put these pieces on here and drew markings so that when I went back to glue, I knew exactly where they needed to go so that everything would fit together the way that I had envisioned. Again, using contact cement, I just adhered these pieces directly onto the arm guard. Once those particular pieces were glued on, I took the arm guard itself and the other components and sprayed them with Plastidip. I use Plastidip largely because it's very easy to use. It comes in a spray can and it goes on just like paint. There are other methods that you can use to prep the foam, but the bottom line is you do have to prep the foam before painting to avoid cracking once the paint is on the foam. Especially once you've been wearing it for a while, the paint will start to crack and peel up. So we want to avoid that, and the best way to do it is to prep it. Again, cutting small pieces to make that beveled edge for the back of the hand. I'm sure there's probably 2 or 3 methods for this, but this is the one I chose. It seemed fairly easy. And I'm just, again, using contact cement, just adhering that to the edges of the piece itself. You can see I also used a few of those pieces to go around the sections that I have designated for the Infinity Stones themselves. Once all of the individual parts had been coated with Plastidip and dried, I did a base coat on here of a copper metallic. I don't know that there's any particular brand that is better than another. I haven't decided that for myself. I will put the brand that I used in the description below in case you'd like to see. I did make sure that I was going through and getting into all the cracks and crevices along here, just getting that really good solid base coat with that copper metallic. I chose to use a leather welder's glove as the foundation for the piece. That seemed like it would be the most comfortable and the best fit. So I did go on to the glove itself with the copper paint and paint over all the areas that would be seen after the build was complete. You can see here that I also put guidelines directly onto the welder's glove. I did that before having painted so that I would know where everything was going to fit. I wanted to make sure that I didn't get anything off center. And I had adhered the glove to the guard with contact cement. You can see I continued to work in small sections. Once I had the guard adhered to the welder's glove, I then started putting some of the smaller pieces together. You can see that I have marked these again with left and right to make sure that I didn't get anything backward. Once those pieces were glued together, I then started adhering them to the arm guard itself. Before adhering the main part of the back of the hand where the Infinity Stones are going to go, I did take a look at the fingers themselves. They are jointed in the actual glove, and the fingertips, of course, are a little bit larger. So I used a pattern of just basically a large T to make the fingertips, again using 1/4 inch EVA foam, and then using some 2mm craft foam, I made curved jointing pieces for the fingers. Starting with the fingertips, which I again numbered to make sure that I didn't put them on the wrong finger. I adhered these to the glove using hot glue. I decided to use hot glue rather than contact cement because I wanted to make sure that I had a good solid fit, and that seemed to work best for me. Once the fingertips were on, then I put each of the individual pieces along the fingers themselves. Again, using hot glue, that seemed like a more flexible fit for the fingers since they are going to be moving. Now, I did Plastidip the fingertips. I did not Plastidip the individual jointing pieces. I may regret that, but so far the paint has held up well, so fingers crossed. Once all of the finger portions were glued onto the glove, I then glued on the hand guard. I did this using a combination of contact cement and hot glue. I wanted it to be secure but a little bit flexible. Again, I did make sure that it was positioned appropriately so that it was in the right spot to the connection to the arm guard itself and not covering the fingers too much. You can see here how those edging pieces that I put on give it a little bit of a beveled effect and allows you to see some depth to the gauntlet itself. Now that all of the pieces are glued to the leather welder's glove, I took a gold metallic paint and put a top coat on there. I started off using a paper towel, but that was going to take too long, so I ended up just going back to my brush. Again, making sure that I was getting into all the cracks and crevices to give it a complete coverage over the entire gauntlet. After the gauntlet was completely covered in gold paint, I wanted to tone it down a little bit, so I did go back with a wash of the copper metallic just to highlight some areas, give it a bit of a worn look. Also making sure again to go over all of the leather portions that are visible with both the gold and the copper wash. After all of the paint has dried, I put on a coat of clear varnish. This is to seal the paint and try to prevent any scratches or cracks to the paint itself. Give it just a tiny bit of protection against some light water so we don't wash off the paint that's already on there. It's now time for the Infinity Stones. The stones we used are from eBay. We'll leave a link to that particular seller in the description below, but you can get them from several different places. I did use contact cement to begin with, but I was concerned about how well secured they were, so I did go back with some hot glue and put a few dabs of hot glue in strategic places to make sure that they were glued down well and that I wouldn't be worried later on about them falling off. You can see here that there's some paper between the fingers. I ended up rolling up some torn up envelopes and putting them in between the fingers while I was putting on that clear varnish because I didn't want to glue the fingers of the gauntlet together. Something to note about this gauntlet, it is large, which it's intended to be. So on my husband's hand, it does go up to his elbow. In order to make this wearable and to prevent it from getting damaged while he was wearing it, we did end up going back and cutting out a portion in the crease of his elbow, so it made it a lot more comfortable and easier to wear. And that is our build for the Infinity Gauntlet. We'll leave a list of materials as well as a PDF of the templates in the description below. If you have any thoughts on this build, or if you have an idea of something you'd like to see me build, please leave that in the comments below. If you've enjoyed this video, we'd appreciate it if you'd give us a like and consider subscribing to our channel. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.